So, in the last two classes, we were discussing the political ideologies, and one of the core political ideology that is still being discussed is none other than liberalism as a political ideology. And as a critic to the liberal political ideology, they developed the socialist theme or socialist political ideology. So, we have already seen liberalism and socialism, right? But there is one ideology that has strongly attracted lots of followers. This is one ideology whose followers actually vouch by their thinker and are ready to even fight for it or even to embrace death for him. And this particular ideology has attracted a lot of followers across the world, that it is still being discussed even after the demise of its founder. But interestingly, the founder has never argued that he himself was putting forward a political ideology. Yes, I am talking about Karl Marx and his ideology, Marxism. Marx never argued that he is a Marxist. But why do you think that Marxism has actually evolved into a political ideology that has attracted lots of people? What is the reason behind it? What are the core themes of Marxism? And do you think that Marxism still has any relevance of the present day? These would be our core discussion area for the day. So, in order to recollect what we have studied in the last class, we were discussing about socialism. And we have identified that there are two forms of socialism. One is the evolutionary route and the other is the revolutionary route. And we have seen the evolutionary route in detail, and we told that, okay, we'll study about the revolutionary detail later. So, the revolutionary socialism and the most important revolutionary socialism is none other than Marxism itself. See, in India, in many of the textbooks and all, we normally identify socialism and Marxism are two different concepts, and they try to differentiate between these two. But in fact, Marxism is nothing other than a form of socialism, a different route of socialism. While we discuss about the revolutionary socialism, the most important socialist or revolutionary socialism is none other than Marxism itself. But the themes of Marxism are so unique that it has identified itself as a new political ideology. Now, let's take you to those times when socialism is being developed across the world. Okay? So, during this period, there was a young thinker who started looking into socialism in a different perspective. He has seen the problems of liberalism. He has been inspired by the problems faced by the working class in an industrialist society. And he started thinking about how to address these problems. Already the socialists were trying to do that. But he believed that those concepts are not correct. There are some problems with the existing socialists. They have clearly identified the problems, but what are their solutions? Cooperation between workers and the factory owners. So he didn't believe in that type of cooperation among the workers and the factory owners. He believed that there is a strong antagonism between these two entities, and this cooperation is very difficult to attain. So during those periods, the socialists were actually clearly criticizing liberalism, but their solution was not at all possible to implement. So into this particular scheme, there comes this thinker who was actually strongly observing the issues within the industrial system. So he has actually read about a very famous writing in which the working class conditions were beautifully analyzed. And these two thinkers actually met through a mutual friend, and they started discussing more and more about the working class conditions. And that led to the origin of Marxism as we see. I am talking about none other than Marx and Engels. See, Engels' father has actually owned some factories in England. And Engels is actually clearly and cleanly, clearly and on first hand has actually observed the problems faced by the working class community. So his analysis of the problem faced by the working class community has actually attracted Marx, and both of them decided to collaborate together and to write on Marxism. To be exact, they started writing on socialism, and they come up with a new form of socialist ideology that is being discussed and debated widely across the world as communism. Okay. So today we are going to look into those concepts. Okay. Are you people clear? Okay. See, most of you, especially most of my students from Kerala, has actually already already heard about Marxism, because Marxist ideology has lots of followers, attractions within the state, right? And there are very strong followers for Marxism. I believe very strong followers, in a sense that they are actually ready to put that life in stake for this particular ideology. So what I'm going to tell you people is that we are not going to discuss initially about how Marxism is there or how Marxism is there as we see right now in, let's say, in Kerala, or to some extent in Bengal or Tripura and all. No. We are actually going to see how Marxism is there as identified by Marx. Because you will see that Marxism as identified by Marx is much different from Marxism that is being followed across the world. So we also try to understand that. Okay. So all of you are with me right now? Till now you people are okay, right? Yes, fine, good. So now first of all, let's look into what was Marx's criticism with respect to existing socialists. Okay. Marx argued that the existing socialists are utopian socialists. They are utopian socialists. They have clearly understood the problems of the present society, of the liberal society, but they haven't, they have identified the ills of the society, but they have not prescribed a proper cure for it. Problem എന്താണെന്ന് മനസ്സിലാക്കി, they have clearly identified the ills of the society, പക്ഷെ അവരുടെ solution, അവരൊരു proper solution പറഞ്ഞിട്ടില്ല. And into these utopian socialists, Marx is coming up with what? Coming up with scientific socialism. So Marx is coming with nothing other than scientific socialism. So you need to understand that Marx himself identifies his ideology as scientific socialism. It's a socialism itself, but it is more scientific. Why? So he tells that, okay, why the reasons are there. He will come to why also. But this is the first point that we want to remember. Marx started bringing up with his ideology because he has observed that the socialist during his time has actually identified the problems of the society, but has never properly brought in a cure for the problems. So he argues that these are utopian socialists. Okay, and what he is going to propose is nothing other than scientific. So therefore he argues his ideology as scientific socialism. So if you look at the famous socialists during his period like Robert Owen, Charles Fourier, Saint-Simon, Proudhon, Sismondi, these were many thinkers during that period who has put forward socialist concepts. So he called all these people or all these thinkers are utopian socialists. Okay, and he is actually, what he says is that their diagnoses are okay, but their cure is not, cure is difficult to attain. So he actually wanted to bring in a scientific way of looking into the history and a scientific way to address the problems. And he believes that since his idea is very scientific, it is easy for the people to follow because it's scientific, because this is, there is logic behind it. You follow it because there is logic behind it. And he bring in the scientific socialism. because he is actually bringing a scientific interpretation of the history. He's not randomly coming up with anything, but Marx is coming up with scientific interpretation of the history. Okay, and based on the scientific interpretation of his history, he's actually arguing that, okay, this has actually happened for this time. So what is going to happen now is this. So X happened, Y happened, Z happened. So therefore, naturally, this should happen. So this is how he has been trying to analyze the history. He brings in many concepts for it called dialectical materialism, historical materialism, etc. Okay, we will come to those words. Don't worry about those words first. Those words are important per se, but don't worry about it. So he argues that my socialism is scientific in nature. In order to understand the scientific socialism, let's look at the core themes of Marxism. See, while we are discussing liberalism, modern liberalism, etc., and while we are discussing about socialism, etc., we try to identify the core themes. And we have always identified 5 core themes for it. But when it comes to Marxism, we try to, there are about 7 core themes, core principles within Marxism that everybody has to be very clearly understood. And the beauty of this core theme is that it is very logically ordered. It is very logically ordered, and which has actually attracted lots of people. So the end itself is actually to bring in a classless society where every person is equal and every person's need is actually met. So such an end is attained through a very systematic manner. So these 7 steps needs to be understood in its order itself. So what we are going to understand right now need to be ordered in that lexical order itself. Okay, fine. Now let's look into the core themes of Marxism. Core themes of Marxism. Okay, first one, dialectic. Let me take some more space. So let's look into the core theme of Marxism. So the first theme is called dialectical materialism. Okay. Next is historical materialism. Okay. Dialectical materialism, historical materialism, theory of surplus value. Theory of surplus value, class struggle, then revolution, dictatorship of proletariat, finally communism. Okay, so one most important thing, don't worry about these names per se. If you understand what it means, then you can actually connect the names also. People normally say that, sir, I don't get those words and all. Don't worry about it. Let's see. So it's called, first one, dialectical materialism. Second is historical materialism. Third is theory of surplus value. Okay. Then fourth is class struggle. Then the fifth is revolution. The sixth is dictatorship of the proletariat. And finally, communism. So these are the core themes of what? Core themes of Marxism. Okay, fine. So, in order to move into these first two concepts, I just want to introduce someone else also. So, Marx is there, Engels is there, right? Both of them is collaborating. But Marx has been influenced by a German thinker, and his name is called Hegel. So, Hegel was a German thinker, an idealist, and he has strongly influenced Marx. So, Marx is actually reading on Hegel and he is writing a critique of Hegel, and which has actually founded or has provided the base for his ideology also, dialectical materialism and historical materialism. Now, let's try to understand this. So, have you understood these 7 concepts? I mean, not understood. You understood the fact that there exist 7 concepts like this? Okay. So, there is dialectical materialism, historical materialism, theory of surplus value, class struggle, revolution, dictatorship of the proletariat, and communism. Okay, now let's take each. Okay. See, in order to understand dialectical materialism, I am introducing to you Hegel. Okay. So, Hegel was a German thinker. Hegel has put forward certain concepts which has actually attracted Marx. On one aspect, Hegel argued that the world is full of ideas. The world is full of ideas, and the material conditions of the world are actually a reflection of ideas. So, Hegel gives emphasis to ideas, and he believed that as a reflection of these ideas, the material conditions of the world are determined. Okay, what do you mean by that? To understand in a very base layman concepts, the material conditions across the world, the economic and the material conditions across the world are actually a reflection of different ideas which are predominant at that time. The ideas that are predominant will have a reflection of what? Reflection on the material conditions. So, this is what Hegel has told. And he believed that there are different ideas are there, and these conflicting ideas would be in conflict with each other. So, he believes that there is an idea is there, an idea opposite to this will come, an idea which is opposite to it will come. This will actually conflict with each other, and as a result what will happen? A new idea will generate over there. So, an idea is there, and another idea would come which is in conflict with the first idea, and these two will be contradict each other, and finally only the truth will prevail from both the idea, which will result into a new idea. So, he is actually trying to put forward how different ideas is actually originating in the world. So, Hegel is actually giving emphasis to what? Emphasis to ideas. He believes that ideas are the predominant force within the world, and all the material conditions across our world are a reflection of idea. That's the first concept. Second concept is that when there is an idea and an idea which is opposite, that will be also be there, and these two will be in conflict, and finally a new idea will evolve out of this conflict. Okay, so these two are some of the fundamental concepts within Hegelian thoughts. Even though Hegel is not there for us to study, because of the influence he has on the Marx, we are trying to understand Hegel also. So, Hegel is not there for us to study, but why we are actually going behind the concept of idea by Hegel? Because Hegel has influenced Marx, and Marx has influenced a lot of us. Okay, so let's look into Hegel once again. Okay, so what does he mean by? So, Hegel actually put forward the concept of dialectical method. He has put forward the concept of dialectical method, in which the whole world is the outcome of idea. And ideas has actually evolved because of conflicting between two ideas. So the first, let's say we will identify that the first idea as if it is a thesis, an idea opposite to this will also come. So that will be what? Antithesis would be there. So there is an element of truth in thesis. There is an element of truth in antithesis also. And these two conflict with each other. When these two conflict with each other, so conflict doesn't mean that, okay, we'll take the sword or we'll take the gun, and no. It is like an ideological confrontation, like debates, discussions and all. So a thesis there, is there, which is in conflict with an antithesis. Okay, so what would be the outcome of this? So a thesis would be there, and antithesis would be there, and this will result in synthesis. In order to give a very simple example of this, I am coming up with a new idea as a thesis, and I am presenting it before you. Let's say that Pradeepan has some argument which is against my idea, and he is coming up with the antithesis to what I am saying. Okay, so we are actually debating, and that is the process where thesis and antithesis conflict with each other. And what would be the outcome of this? Okay, so I will be putting forward certain argument, he will be putting forward certain argument, and finally a new idea might evolve out of this, and that is nothing other than synthesis. So that becomes the prominent idea for some time. So this will become the thesis. After some time, someone else will come. Let's say Ammu is coming with an antithesis to what has evolved out of it. So this synthesis has become a thesis, but now Ammu is actually coming with an antithesis to this. So these two will conflict, a synthesis will develop. So that will become the thesis for some time. Then an antithesis will develop. It will get conflict, and a new synthesis will come. And this is the dialectical method through which we are actually moving towards ultimate truth. And this is what is put forward by Hegel. This is the method of dialecticism put forward by Hegel, which has actually attracted Marx a lot. Okay. Okay, let me. Okay, so I will address that. Okay, fine. So one question was that, sir, Plato and Socrates have talked about dialectics as well. So can we say Hegel was influenced by the Greek thought when he came up with his dialectical materialism? That's an interesting concept. See, while we are actually trying to understand Plato, we will try to understand Socrates first, because Socrates has heavily influenced Plato and Aristotle. Okay, and Plato would be one of our core concepts of study while we start our regular classes from July 5th. Now we'll be starting with Socrates and Plato initially. So you can see that how Socrates' books are actually written, or Plato's books are actually written. So in this, you can see that he is actually going and talking with people in market, in community, and a discussions is actually happening between the people over there. And through the discussions, he is actually putting forward the concept. So I am saying something, so another person is replying to that, and these confrontations or communications are actually going on. And finally, he will put forward his idea over there. So Hegel has been influenced by Socrates and Plato also. See, there is a very famous statement. The entire Western political thought and theory is nothing but a footnote to Plato's readings. That means Plato has been so influenced the coming generations that the entire Western political thought is nothing but a footnote. You know the footnote, right? So in basic books and all, you will see some 1, 2, 3, which gives an explanation of what is there. So the other thoughts are like that only. So that is the influence that Plato and Marx had. So definitely Hegel has been influenced by them also. Okay, so first point. I will tell you. You take a book. So in a book, you can see that there is a word is given which we really don't know, which needs an explanation. So they will mark as 1 or 2 or 3, right? And towards the end of the chapter, we will identify that one and will be an explanation is given, or it will talk about from which book it is being, influenced, etc. So an analysis of Plato has actually put forward that the entire Western political thought is nothing but a footnote of Plato's concepts. Understood? So that is the idea of footnote. Okay, fine. Then, is it like an evolution? Okay, see, and Amu has told about absolute truth. I will tell you. So this thesis and antithesis is there, right? So there is an element of truth there. There is an element of truth inside this. When these are actually conflicting, so that conflict is actually, it is a process of evolution of ideas. See, it is not evolution as we see in biology, but it is more of evolution of ideas. Okay, so a thesis and idea is there, an antithesis, another idea is there, which is actually conflict to each other. So these two gets debate. So what actually happens is that in this debate or in this confrontation of thesis and antithesis, only the truth will remain. So anything false is there in this thesis will actually go. Anything false in antithesis will also go. So these two will fuse together to form synthesis, which will become a thesis. Again, this process goes on. And over a period, finally, we will this process goes on until we reach the ultimate truth or absolute truth. So this is what Hegel has actually put forward. So Marx looked into this and Marx felt, okay, this seems interesting. This dialectical method could actually help to explain my idea of socialism. So a thesis and antithesis is there. It is getting conflict or it is in conflict. Result in synthesis. And this process of evolution of ideas goes on. And once we reach the absolute truth, there is no antithesis to it, right? There is no antithesis to it. Once we reach the absolute truth, there is no antithesis to it. So the process of that evolution of ideas will also end. Okay. You people are with me till this point? No, you don't worry too much about, see, some things are not like a material thing. Like we cannot actually see this, but we can actually understand this. How? Because this is nothing but a confrontation of two ideas. And out of this confrontation, a new thesis actually develops. And that new thesis is something what we identify as synthesis. So that would be the ruling idea at this particular time. So someone else will come against this. This confrontation goes on till we reach the ultimate truth or absolute truth. Once we reach the absolute truth, what is the point of coming with an antithesis to that? Because it is absolute truth. So there is nothing opposite to that. So that is the process of evolution. Okay, you people are fine. So, like Socrates says on necessity of debates of examining. Okay, see, Socrates actually told that through debates we are trying to examine our life. So he says that an unexamined life is not worth living. So the main argument is that he believes, or Socrates believes that, okay, let's go and talk with people. Let's examine what our life is. So Socrates is at the beginning of this ideology. So many thinkers has actually come up from Greece and all across Europe. Many thinkers has actually come after Socrates. So all those, many of them has actually influenced Hegel, Marx, etc. Okay, so by the time we are reaching Hegel, that initial the concept of examining life, and we have moved from there. We have moved and we have reached a point where we are trying to analyze what is happening across the world. So Hegel argues that across this world, there would be some fundamental ideas is there. And all the material conditions means what? The economy, the state, all other things are actually a reflection of what? A reflection of these ideas. So idea is there. Anything that is across the world is a reflection of that. Okay. Sir, how did synthesis help him explain his form of... Abhay, we are coming to that. Okay. We are coming to how this thesis, antithesis is actually being used. Now you need to have this in your mind, because while we are trying to analyze the history in historical materialism, you can see that he is actually using these concept over there. Okay, we'll come to that. Okay, fine. 1 minute. Now, I believe everybody has got the idea of thesis plus antithesis leading to synthesis, and the synthesis becomes a thesis, an antithesis comes, it goes on till we reach the absolute truth. So everybody is fine with that particular concept. So what has actually happened is that Hegel believes that the world is full of ideas, right? Marx says that, okay, I liked Hegel's concept and all. I also liked his idea of dialectism, fine. But it is not ideas that actually determine the material conditions of the world. It is the other way around. It is not the ideas that determine the material conditions of the world, but it is the other way around. According to Marx, he believed in, like what he says that, I have just put Hegel's thought, which was standing, it was standing on its head. Now I have just corrected Hegel's thought. He believes that, or Marx believes that, Hegel's thought was actually standing on its head, and I have just corrected it. So what Marx has told is that, see, it is the material conditions, it is the material condition that that determines what is across the world. It is not the ideas that is actually a reflection. It is a material condition that actually determines what is there across the world. Okay. So material condition means economy. So it is the economic means of production that actually determines the world around it. Okay. So he strongly believes that it is not dialectical idealism. It is not dialectical idealism as identified by Hegel. It is dialectical materialism. See, if you look at Marx's thought, everybody argues about capturing power, political power, etc. But what Marx has focused is on how the economic conditions should be. So he focused more on the material conditions or the economy, and he believes that whoever captures the economy or whoever controls the economy controls the other provisions. So that is what he has, one of the fundamental concepts within Marx. So Marx has actually come up with the base superstructure concept. Base superstructure. Okay. What is base superstructure? So let's say this is the base. Okay. According to Marx, the base is nothing but economy. Base is nothing but the economy. That is the economic sector. Who controls the economic sector will actually be able to control the society, will be able to control the government and other things around it. So, if these are superstructures, superstructure means the civil society, the family, civil society, our education system, the state, the government, everything is actually controlled by whom? By the base, that is the economy. It is not the other way around. So even we call or criticize Marx thought as economic reductionism. What do you mean by economic reductionism? Because he has reduced everything to economy. And he believes that it is the economy that actually determines what is there in the world. So that is why we see that in Marxian concept, there is a strong connection with respect to the determination of who controls the economy. So Marx believes that okay, it is the base that actually determines the superstructure, and the base is nothing but the economic sector, and the superstructure consists of what the civil society, the government, and all other system, the church, the all other system. So who controls this? These are actually controlled by the base. The superstructure is only a reflection of what is there in the base. So there is a crude economic determinism. Economic determinism means that the entire concept of Marxian thought focuses on this concept of economy. Who controls economy? Even we will see this 7 concepts, right? All these concepts are actually rooted in this idea of who controls economy. Who controls economy? Because economy determines things around us. See, I told you that like he gave focus on not idea but the material conditions. That means the economy. So who controls the economy will control the entire superstructure. Understood? Economic. Okay. Crude economic determinism. Why we said it's a crude economic determinism means why it is crude? Because we focus only on that. We don't try to see the other way around. Okay, base is reflecting superstructure. We are not at all worried about how the superstructure is there. Marx was not at all worried, not we. Marx is not at all worried about. Okay, so let's try to consolidate what we have studied so far. Hegel was there, German thinker. Influenced by the concept of dialecticism, Hegel has put forward dialectical idealism. His concept of idealism is that idea is the one that determines everything across the world. The world is actually a reflection of idea. Second idea is that an idea is there, an idea opposite to this will come. So this thesis and antithesis will conflict, a synthesis will develop, and the synthesis will become the new thesis, and this process goes on. Finally, we reach the ultimate truth. This is what Hegel has argued. When it comes to Marx, Marx says that I like the idea of dialecticism, but it is not dialectical idealism, but rather it is dialectical materialism. Because the world is not a reflection of the idea, but the world is a reflection of the material condition. And he believes that in the concept of base superstructure concept, where the base, the economic base controls the superstructure. The base is the superstructure is only a reflection of the base. What is there in the base? Who controls the base? Correspondingly, there would be the superstructure. And because his focus was solely on the base, that is the economic sector, we identify it as crude economic determinism. Okay. Are you clear so far? Are people clear so far? So Hegel, so to all my Malayali students over there, Hegel dialectical idealism പറഞ്ഞു. അതായത് ഐഡിയ ആണ് ലോകത്ത് എല്ലാ കാര്യങ്ങളും തീരുമാനിക്കുന്നത്. മെറ്റീരിയൽ കണ്ടീഷൻസ് മുഴുവൻ ഈ ഐഡിയയുടെ റിഫ്ലക്ഷനാണ്. അതായത് ഒരു പ്രോമിനന്റ് ഐഡിയ വരുന്നു. ഐഡിയ കുഡ് ബി, അതായത് ഒരു ഐഡിയ എന്ന് വെച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഇൻഡിവിജ്വലിന് ഫ്രീഡം കൊടുക്കുന്ന ലിബറൽ പ്രിൻസിപ്പിൾ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞൊരു ഐഡിയ. അപ്പം ലോകത്തോളം ബാക്കിയുള്ള കണ്ടീഷൻസ് മുഴുവൻ ഈ ഐഡിയയുടെ റിഫ്ലക്ഷൻ ആയിരിക്കും എന്നുള്ളത്. അപ്പം ഹെഗൽ പറയുന്ന ഒരു ഐഡിയ എടുക്കൂ, ഐഡിയയുടെ റിഫ്ലക്ഷനാണ് ലോകം മുഴുവൻ. ഓക്കെ, എന്നിട്ട് ഒരു ഐഡിയക്ക് ബദലായിട്ട് മറ്റൊരു ഐഡിയ വരും. ഇവ തമ്മിൽ കോൺഫ്ലിക്റ്റ് ചെയ്യും, അപ്പോൾ ഒരു സിന്തസിസ് ഉണ്ടാകും. ഇത് പ്രോസസ് കണ്ടിന്യൂ ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടും. കാരണം എന്താ, ഐഡിയാസ് ഇങ്ങനെ ഇവോൾവ് ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടേ ഇരിക്കുക. അൾട്ടിമേറ്റ്ലി വി വിൽ റീച്ച് ദ അബ്സല്യൂട്ട് ട്രൂത്ത്. മാർക്സ് ഇത് വന്ന് കണ്ടു, ഡയലക്റ്റിസം ഇഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടു. ഏത് ഇങ്ങനെ അതായത് കോൺഫ്ലിക്റ്റായി പോകുന്ന കൺസെപ്റ്റ് ഇഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടു. പക്ഷെ ഐഡിയയുടെ കോൺഫ്ലിക്റ്റ് അല്ല. അദ്ദേഹം പറയുന്നത് എന്താണെന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ മെറ്റീരിയൽ കണ്ടീഷൻ്റെ കോൺഫ്ലിക്റ്റാണ്. അദ്ദേഹം പറയാൻ കാരണം ഒരിക്കലും ഐഡിയയുടെ റിഫ്ലക്ഷൻ അല്ല വേൾഡ്, മെറ്റീരിയൽ കണ്ടീഷൻ്റെ റിഫ്ലക്ഷനാണ്. അപ്പോൾ മെറ്റീരിയൽ കണ്ടീഷൻ ആര് കൺട്രോൾ ചെയ്യുന്നു? ആരാണ് മീൻസ് ഓഫ് പ്രൊഡക്ഷൻ കൺട്രോൾ ചെയ്യുന്നത്? അവരാണ് സൂപ്പർ സ്ട്രക്ചറിലെ കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഡിറ്റർമൈൻ ചെയ്യുന്നത്. സോ മാർക്സ് പറഞ്ഞു ഡയലറ്റിക്കൽ മെറ്റീരിയലിസം. ഡയലറ്റിക്കൽ എന്ന് വെച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ എന്താ? രണ്ട് ഐഡിയാസ് തമ്മിൽ കോൺഫ്ലിക്റ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. മെറ്റീരിയലിസം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് എന്താ? മാറ്റർ, അതായത് എക്കണോമിയാണ് ഏറ്റവും ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻ്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഡിറ്റർമിനിങ് ഫാക്ടർ. മെറ്റീരിയൽ കണ്ടീഷൻസ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നതാണ് എക്കണോമിക് കണ്ടീഷൻസ്. ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് ദ മോസ്റ്റ് ഡിറ്റർമിനിങ് ഫാക്ടർ. സോ ഹി ആർഗ്യൂസ് ദാറ്റ് ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് dialectical materialism instead of dialectical idealism put forward by Hegel. Everyone is clear so far? Rashmi, Aishal, Alisa, Pooja. Okay. VSN, may I know who is VSN? Is it clear? No, I couldn't know your name, that's why. So everyone is clear with the dialectical materialism. So far is good. Now, what happened is that Marx says that his socialism is scientific, right? So Marx wants to prove that his socialism is scientific. So what he do is that he takes history and he's trying to analyze history. He's trying to analyze history. Okay, in the past this has happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. So now we are this. Now this is what is going to happen. Understood how he's trying to explain it? Something happened in the past, then it resulted in this, then it happened. So he's actually trying to analyze the history. So there he's actually using this concept of dialecticism again. Okay, so first thing is that we have understood what is meant by dialectical materialism. We have understood what Hegel has actually put forward. The concept of base superstructure would be discussed in detail. Okay, you don't want to worry, because one aspect where Marx has actually failed is this base superstructure concept. Because later thinkers in Marxism itself has come and criticized Marx, or has suggested for change in this crude economic determinism. See, there is a very famous thinker in Italy called Gramsci. He was a practicing Marxist. So normally, like people now after studying the political thought, normally people will ask like, who is your favorite thinker? Who is your favorite thinker? I mean, most of them would be actually identify that Gramsci is my favorite thinker, because his ideas are so revolutionary that we started questioning what we have understood so far. So Gramsci is actually very interesting, and Gramsci has strongly argued against this base superstructure concept, because Gramsci, when he's trying to practice Marxism in the Italian society, what he has found is that it is not difficult, it is not as easy as Marx has identified, because it is not that the economic base actually determines the civil society. It is the other way also, because the civil society is also trying to influence the economy. So we'll come across that things in later. Okay. So I just want you to understand. So some of you might even have a doubt, sir, how is this economy controlling everything? Don't you think that the social conditions also reflect in the economy? It is there. Now that is one failure of Marx, or that is why he identified as a crude economic determinism. Later thinkers has actually come up with the idea of both superstructure and base being independent and reflecting each other. So right now we believe that, or Marx believes that, economy is there, superstructure is just a reflection of economy. Okay, fine. Now let's look into the next concept within Marxism. Okay, historical materialism. So we are already familiarized with the word materialism. That means it is a material conditions that actually determines now what is there across the world, right? What is there across us, the material conditions. So he's actually trying to analyze the history and say that how the material conditions of each time has actually changed. Okay, so he put forward this idea of historical materialism, and basically this is the, if you look at dialectical materialism, that is the philosophical base of Marxism. And that is a philosophical idea. What is the philosophical idea? That matter is what actually determines the entire thing, and the material conditions get changed over a period, and finally we will reach the ultimate truth, that idea of dialecticism. So that is the philosophical base. Now we are looking into the scientific base. Why it is known as scientific base? Because he is analyzing history. History is something which we know. So he is analyzing history and he is reaching the present point. Okay. So what he says is that initially there was a condition known as primitive communism. No, initially there was a condition known primitive communism, which actually led to the slavery system, from where it got evolved into feudalism, from where it got evolved into capitalism, so from primitive communism the history got evolved into slavery system. We'll come to that. Okay. Now this is what he argues. From the primitive communism, it got evolved into the slavery system. From slavery system, it got evolved into the feudal system. From feudal system, it got evolved into the capitalist system. From capitalist system, so right now we are here. From here, we will get evolved into what? I will get evolved into communism. So how he is actually putting forward his idea? From primitive communism to slavery system, from there to feudalism, from there to capitalism, and from there to communism. Let's try to look into that. So the first thing that he identifies that it is the earlier society. I mean, the earlier society means when man has actually came to the world, during that initial phase, like during that initial evolution period, there was no there was no form of exploitation or conflict or struggle, etc. during that period, because nobody was actually owning anything. It was a classless society. It was a stateless society. During that initial period, when this concept of state, I mean, everything was actually formed, Adima Manisha, I mean, that early men, okay, so they were like basically hunters, gatherers. Now, even before that period, like they were actually trying to kill the wild animals and to eat that. They were during those period. Do they own property? No. So that was a propertyless class. Was there a state there? No, there was no state. Okay. Was there any difference of class between people? No, there was no class between people. So such a situation was known as primitive communism. So primitive communism was there initially. Okay. Why it is known as communism? Because there is no property, there is no class, there is no state, etc. Which is something that we will observe in the communism also. So this is actually a primitive form of communism. Okay, everyone understood this? And like even between tribal oligarchy and all, just think about a condition where even before the origin of the concept of family, society, etc., man was simply existing in the world, right? So during those periods, there was no property. So even in certain tribal communities also, you will see some ideas being followed. Like there is no property, there is no class, there is no state, etc. But he's actually talking of those primitive stages when man is actually in a situation where he owns nothing, he just exists. Okay. So understood that concept of primitive communism. It was that those earlier periods. Okay, see, you need to also understand that like Marx is looking into history not from a timeline. I mean, from this particular year to this particular year. No, he's actually looking into that evolution of man. And during that initial period of the evolution of the man, where he was basically hunter-gatherers and all, he was following a communist system of life. Now, what do you mean by communist system of life? Where there is no property, there is no private ownership, there is no state to control us, there is no class difference among the people. That is what primitive communism means. Okay, fine. So, from primitive communism, we have actually slowly got evolved into a slavery system. Okay, so the transition is from primitive communism to slavery system. So what actually happens is that slowly from that primitive communism, we started evolving. We started slowly evolving. And we have understood that, okay, let's look at it like this. We were actually trying to kill animals and all. Then we slowly identified that like some stones which is like pointed stones could actually kill the animals much easier. So they slowly started making axes or bows or what you called weapons to kill animals. Okay. And slowly like people started, okay, this is my weapon. This is my place. So that concept of property slowly evolved, private property slowly evolved into the system. Okay. So slowly as and when the technology started progressing, man started moving away from that concept of primitive communism. We started talking about my area, my property, my weapons. So the concept of private ownership actually slowly evolved into the system. So a property owning class started getting evolved. A property owning class slowly started getting evolved. When the property owning class slowly started getting evolved, now the society could actually be divided like those who have the property and those who doesn't have the property. So that concept of primitive communism is no longer existing. Finally, it started moving into a society or a system where certain segment of the people who owns the private property started determining what is there across us. They become the masters. They become the masters. And they started using the other people as their slaves. So that primitive communism, which was a propertyless, a private ownershipless system, slowly got evolved into property owning class. So society get divided into property owning and propertyless. Property owning class slowly become the masters and the propertyless class slowly started becoming the slaves. And we followed a slavery system for a long period. Even man was actually identified as a property by another man. Okay, so that slavery system was in place for a long period. Finally, then what actually happened is that, so primitive communism, it got evolved into slavery system. How? With the changes that is actually happening in the society. That is the changes that is actually happening in the material conditions. Earlier, the material conditions were owned by all. Later on, when the material condition changes, the society gets evolved into the slavery system. Then what happened is that there has been a strong influence of agriculture in our system. Slowly, which the slavery system get evolved into feudal system. The land becomes one of the most determining resource in the economy. And the one who controls the land actually becomes the lords. And it slowly resulted in an idea of feudal system where the land owning society or the land owning people become the prominent group. So that feudal system has been in practice, which actually, the primitive communism was replaced by the slavery system and the slavery system get replaced by the feudal system. Then the next set of evolution comes where the material conditions or with the advent of what? With the advent of industry, technology and all. It is not only the feudal class that actually becomes the determining element. The one with the capital, the one with money, the one with the technology. So the one with technology or the one with the major means of production or one who controls the major means of production become the prominent element in the capitalist system. And there comes what? And there comes the workers who are working over there. So Marx says that if you look into the history, primitive communism get replaced by slavery system with the change of material condition, which get replaced by the feudalism by the change of material condition, which get replaced by the capitalism by the change of material condition, which is going to get replaced by communism. So, capitalism is basically the division of society into bourgeois and the proletariat. So, here the focus is more on profit, the focus is more on increasing one's own property. So, this will actually result in a system where the working class is actually exploited to the maximum, and this will finally result in a revolution, and that revolution would actually result in communism. Sir, is Marx influenced by Rousseau's thought on state of nature and private property when concerned personal? Okay. Like, see, A56 concerned personal possession. No, I didn't understand what you mean by that. Can you please repeat the evolution of capitalism from feudalism? So that was with the same with the feudalism also. So I will tell you. See, during feudalism, in a feudal system, the landowning, or because agriculture was the most prominent means of production. So the landowning people were the most determining factor in feudal system. But when it comes to capitalism, it is not only the landowning, they were prominent there. I am not saying that they are completely removed. A new classes started becoming in a capital system where people with money who has access to technology, they could actually replace even the landowners and to become the most determining element in a capitalist system. So money, technology, etc. become a determining factor because during this transition we are coming up with the industrial revolution, and the industrial revolution is what changed feudalism to capitalism. See, Amu, what you want to understand is that to all those people who think that the feudal system and the capitalist system are same, it's not that correct. A feudal system is where the landowning, they own only one means of production, that land. But when it comes to capitalism, not only the land, so they are actually controlling capital, they are actually controlling the land, they are actually controlling the technology. So that is the transition that has happened between feudalism and capitalism. So this is what Marx has actually identified. So in slavery system is that the man were concerned about material or personal private possession. In the slavery system, man was actually worried about personal possession, and even slaves was like a personal possession to man. Okay. So see, historically speaking, you might find differences with Marx as actually observed. So this is Marx's observation of history. See, what he says is that initially there was a primitive communism. From there it moved to slavery system. From there it moved to feudal system. From there it got changed to capitalism. So some people will argue that, sir, these are more or less the same. It is the same people who owns land over here has actually become the prominent elements in the capitalist system. See, to an extent you might be correct, but it is not always correct because it is not only those people who has actually capitalized that industrial revolution. There are people who has actually come up with capital, the people who has actually come up with access to technology, who has actually become a determining element in the capitalist system or that during that industrial revolution. Okay. Have you got that? Have you got this evolution as propounded by Marx? Everyone? Okay. Did he mention the growth of other class of people? I will come to that point, Pooja. And there is an interesting question. Sir, was capitalism more brutal compared to feudalism? That's actually a very interesting system. It was more, see, there were some interesting questions. First question is that, was capitalism more, what was it like, more brutal than feudalism? See, I will tell you what has actually happened during capitalism as identified by Marx. The focus was on private property. and the profit. When the competition was high, the bourgeois class was not ready to compromise on the profit. So, the working condition of the workers become so bad that the primary focus of the bourgeois has to only on the profit. So they started exploiting the workers to the maximum, So it was more brutal than the feudal system. And it was not only more brutal, this was a system where the industrial revolution has actually made all the workers come together to one point. See, earlier also in feudalism also, people were being exploited. But when it comes to industrial system, the workers has been gathered to one point, right? So they are working in factory, they are being exploited. So the workers slowly got identified that, okay, I belong to the working class. I am being exploited. And this particular point starts him to think about how to address this. The exploitation becomes so extent that the only solution for the working class or the proletarian class is to revolt back. And that revolution will finally transition the system from capitalism to communism. So Pradeepan was asking, sir, how is the transition from capitalism to communism? That is what he explains throughout his thought. What he says is that this social change is inevitable. When primitive communism to slavery system happened, and from slavery to feudalism happened, and feudalism to capitalism happened, capitalism to communism will happen. Since these have happened already in the history, this is going to happen. So this is what he put forward by arguing that it has moved from capitalism to communism. Pradeepan, that is what we are going to explain in detail. And with respect to the question whether it was more inhuman than feudalism, this would actually be addressed by the concept of theory of surplus value and what was actually happening during that industrial revolution period. Okay. Now, did he mention the growth of other classes? He was more focused on these two classes, which is again one of his criticism, that he wasn't worried about other forms of classes being developed. So he says that the people can normally be divided into two classes. Either he is a worker or a proletariat, or he is a bourgeois. He wasn't worried about other classes of society. Okay. So, the sequence as well as the direction of the social evolution is something that we cannot change. Primitive communism has led to slavery system to feudalism, feudalism to capitalism. So after this, revolution will happen. After this, dictatorship of the proletariat would be there, and finally it will reach in the final evolution. What is the final evolution? That is communism. So if you look at what Marx has been talking about dialectical materialism and historical materialism, you could actually see that, okay, one particular form of material condition is there. So this got evolved into slavery system. This got evolved into feudalism, which got evolved into capitalism. Then this is going to evolve now. And communism is that ultimate truth. Which ultimate truth? Thesis, antithesis, resulting in synthesis. This goes on ultimately when we reach a particular point, right? And that final point of this evolution is communism. And from communism, we are reaching a point where the society is not divided in the name of class, property, state, or any other thing. It is only we people that exist over there. So there is no form of exploitation. Since there is no form of exploitation, there is no form of evolution from that particular point. So that is being identified as the last point of evolution of the history. So Marx says that, okay, this is the evolution, and finally we are going to reach there. Okay, this transition is something that we are going to discuss. Okay, don't worry. But what he says that in communism comes that final evolution or the ultimate truth. Okay. So far you are okay? You are okay with dialectical materialism and historical materialism? Everyone? See, there was one more question, how he has been influenced. There was one more question, like Rousseau's thought of state of nature and private property. See, since Rousseau was very new to you people, so that is why we are not entering into those domains. And again, while we are analyzing the political thought, we will start from Plato, Aristotle, Machiavelli, like that we will evolve, and during those period, while even though Rousseau is not directly part of our syllabus, we try to look into Rousseau also. And we can see how he has, how he is influenced Marx also. Okay, so that is something heavy for the beginners. So that is why we are not moving into that domain. So primitive communism to slavery system to feudalism to capitalism, and finally we are reaching communism. Now the second concept is also very clear to you people. Now comes the third idea, that is theory of surplus value. Theory of surplus value. Okay, so in order to help you to understand the theory of surplus value, see, Abdul Adil, okay, you are working for me. You are a very skilled carpenter. Okay, Abdul says that, don't worry, just imagine that you are a very skilled carpenter. Okay, see, I have enough money with me. I have my tools and everything ready. So what I did is that I went to the forest depot. No, I didn't go and directly started maram murikkan thodangiyilla. Endu chedu? I got the wood. Let's say from forest depot or somewhere I got the wood. So I brought wood for 10,000 rupees. Now this is for you to just understand, okay. I just brought wood for 10,000 rupees. And I called Abdul and told him that, see Abdul, I want you to make chairs for me from this, or let's say dining table for me from this. And this 10,000 rupees wood, with this wood I can actually make 10 dining tables. For each dining table, I can sell it for 10,000 rupees. So, what is the transition? So, that 10,000 rupee material, 10,000 rupees material got transferred into 1 lakh rupees, right? So, the transition is that a material worth 10,000 get transferred into 100,000. In other words, 1 lakh rupees. Okay? So, what has actually happened over this period is that theory of surplus value, so we have seen the philosophical foundation of Marxian concept. What is the philosophical foundation? Dialectical materialism. What is the scientific foundation? That is historical materialism. Now we are trying to understand that economic base of Marxian thought. What is the economic base of Marxian thought? That is the concept of theory of surplus value. What he says is that how the working class is being exploited. He is trying to analyze how the working class is being exploited. He argues that labor is the most vital means of production. Why labor is the most vital means of production? Because he is the one who creates value. If Abdul wasn't there, this 10,000 rupees wood would still be a 10,000 rupees wood. But he is the one who has actually created value over here, in which the dining tables has been transferred, or sorry, the wood has been transferred to dining table, each costing 10,000 rupees. See, let's say that I am giving Abdul, let's say 15K as the salary during this period. I am giving Abdul 15K, or let's say that he makes, it takes 1.5 days for him to complete one dining table. No, it is for you to just understand, okay, 1.5 days for him to complete a dining table, and he completes it with 15 days. Each day I am giving him 1,000 rupees. So, 15,000 rupees is the salary that I give to, or rather than saying salary, it is the wage that I give to Abdul. So when the value created was 90K, and out of this 90K value that is being created, I shared only 15K with Abdul, who was the actual creator of that value. No, this is what Marx is trying to help us to understand how the labor is being exploited. As a labor charge, I gave Abdul 15K when the value created by him was 90K. And this surplus value is actually pocketed by me as profit. If a considerable amount is actually given to whom are given to the labor would have been happy. The labor's working, the living conditions would be high. But in the process of increasing my profit, what I do is that I try to maximize my profit over a period, right? So I have pocketed that additional surplus value created as profit into my pocket. On next day, Ammu has seen that, okay, this is a lucrative business. Ammu then did what? Ammu also went to the forest depot and get 10,000 rupees of wood. And Ammu is actually asking Rashmi to make dining tables for her. Now, Rashmi is the worker for Ammu. Ammu want to compete with me in the market, right? So what does Ammu do? Ammu will actually try to sell it for a lesser money. Now, I don't want to lose out the market to Ammu. So what would I do? I will actually ask Abdul, say, Abdul, conditions are becoming very difficult. So you do one thing, you complete this 10 in 10 days. You complete this 10 dining tables in 10 days. So that I can actually give out only 10,000 rupees for the labor conditions. So when the profit is actually getting affected by the competition in the market, the bourgeois class is not that ready to compromise on that profit. And this difficult working condition is being transferred to whom? Transferred to the proletarian class. So in theory of surplus value, Marx argues that even though the surplus value is being created by the labor, it is being pocketed by the bourgeois class. When that when that marking condition or the competition in the market increases and the profit get affected, the labor class would be the first one to burn the beer or to bear the cost of that competition. The working conditions of the working class become so exploited or so difficult that they become exploited a lot. Have you understood that? Have you understood that? So in capitalism, the wage paid is lower in proportion to the amount of value created by the laborer. And the difference between the value created by the worker and the value paid to the worker constitute the surplus value. This is also known as the concealed labor. Okay. And this concealed labor or the surplus value is profited by whom? Profited by me and Ammu. Because we are whom? We are the capitalist class. Okay. So, simple ആയിട്ട് പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ, so for my students in Malayalam, വളരെ സിമ്പിൾ ആയിട്ട് പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഒരു സാധനം ക്രിയേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ ഉണ്ടാകുന്നൊരു വാല്യൂ ഉണ്ട്. ആ വാല്യൂ ശരിക്കും ക്രിയേറ്റ് ചെയ്തത് വർക്കറാണ് എന്ന് ആർഗ്യൂ ചെയ്യുന്നു? മാർക്സ് ആർഗ്യൂ ചെയ്യുന്നു. പക്ഷെ ആ വർക്കറിന് കറസ്പോണ്ടിങ് ആയിട്ട് നമ്മൾ എന്ത് കൊടുക്കുന്നില്ല? വാല്യൂ കൊടുക്കുന്നില്ല. 10,000 രൂപയുടെ സാധനം 1,00,000 രൂപയുടെ ഫർണിച്ചറാക്കി മാറ്റിയപ്പം ആ വാല്യൂ ക്രിയേറ്റ് ചെയ്തത് വർക്കറാണ്. 90,000 റുപ്പീസിൻ്റെ വാല്യൂ ക്രിയേറ്റ് ചെയ്ത വർക്കറിന് ഒരു 10,000 15,000 ആയിരിക്കും നമ്മൾ സാലറി ആയിട്ട് കൊടുക്കുന്നത്. ബാക്കി ഉള്ള പൈസ, ഈ 75,000 രൂപ ആ കൺസീൽഡ് ലേബർ ആരാ പോക്കറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്? അത് പോക്കറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നത് ക്യാപിറ്റലിസ്റ്റ് ക്ലാസ്സാണ്. എന്നെയും അമ്മൂനെയും പോലുള്ള ക്യാപിറ്റലിസ്റ്റ് ക്ലാസ്സാണ് എന്ത് ചെയ്യുന്നത്? മാക്സിമം പ്രോഫിറ്റ് പോക്കറ്റിലാക്കാൻ നോക്കുന്നത്. ഇതിൻ്റെ ബ്രണ്ട് അനുഭവിക്കുന്നത് ആരാ? അതിൻ്റെ ബ്രണ്ട് ശരിക്കും അനുഭവിക്കുന്നത് അബ്ദുലിനെയും രശ്മിയും പോലുള്ള വർക്കിംഗ് ക്ലാസ്സാണ്. അപ്പോൾ വർക്കിംഗ് ക്ലാസ്സിൻ്റെ കോമ്പറ്റീഷൻ കൂടുന്തോറും വർക്കിംഗ് ക്ലാസ്സിൻ്റെ കണ്ടീഷൻസ് മോശമായിക്കൊണ്ടേയിരിക്കുക. അപ്പോൾ ഇത് മോർ ബ്രൂട്ടൽ ആണെന്നുള്ള ചോദ്യത്തിന് ഉത്തരം ഇവിടുന്ന. അണ്ടർസ്റ്റുഡ്? സോ ഈവൻ ദോ ദേ ആർ ദ വൺ ഹു ക്രിയേറ്റ്സ് the value, they are not being paid correspondingly. And when we think that, okay, at least they are being paid, but the paying, the working condition become so difficult that they are being forced to work in extra time, work in inhuman conditions, etc., so that the profit is not going down. Okay. Fine. But do you think that this is being accepted in the capitalist system? No. See, basically, a classical economist will strongly oppose this. And what he will say is that, see, this surplus value will actually result in capital accumulation. This capital accumulation will turn out to be investment in the system. I will be buying new machineries and all using the surplus value, and which will actually result in growth and prosperity. So, this profit will turn out to be capital accumulation, which would turn out to be investment and better growth as per a capitalist economist. But Marx actually says that this will actually result in what? Result in exploitation of the workers, and this needs to be addressed. This will result in the exploitation of workers, which needs to be addressed. Okay. So far you people are ready? Clear with me? Dialectical materialism, historical materialism. From there, we reach the concept of theory of surplus value. Are people ready? So the first one was the philosophical basis. The next one was the historical or scientific basis. Then the next one was the economic basis of Marxian theory. Okay, fine. Now let's move to class struggle. That's the fourth idea. See, Abdul, who is my worker, sees me as his God, the one who actually gives him salary, the one who actually gives him job. Similarly, Rashmi would be seeing Ammu, her boss, as the God, because he is the one who is actually giving the job. And many times, the worker doesn't actually understand that he is being exploited. And the workers continue living in this exploited condition. What happened in an industrial revolution is that these workers started coming together into a common place. So right now, Ammu and Rashmi is actually working in factory, and they are talking with each other. Ammu says that, oh, my boss is very nice, but my working condition is, Abdul and Rashmi is working in the same factory or the same system, close to each other, and they started talking to each other. So my boss is very good, but my working condition is very bad. So the other person also, my boss is also very good, but my working condition is very bad. I am asked to work this much time. So they slowly started understanding that they are being exploited. When they attain this consciousness of, the consciousness that, okay, we are workers. So the first set of consciousness, okay, we are workers, we are being exploited. And the large number of people come together, then only they started realizing that, okay, it is a very systematic exploitation. And this will actually result in what? This will actually result in the class struggle. So the society will actually be divided into two classes. So what Marx actually says is that history of all hitherto existing society has been history of class struggle. So what he says is that if you look at history, all the societies, it has been the history of the class struggle within that society. You take each society, there will obviously be two classes over there: master, slave, the landlord, the serf, the capitalist and the workers. So if you look at the history would actually be what? History would actually be the history of the class struggle between, or the class struggle in the society. So history of all hitherto existing society has been the history of class struggle. It is a statement from Communist Manifesto itself. So the antagonism between the two classes is a determining element within Marxian thought. Okay, so by virtue of means of production, the property owning class would actually be exploiting the propertyless class. What is the role of the state here? State would actually support in this exploitation. The state would actually be determined by the one who is owning property. The state is actually a reflection of the economy, right? One who controls the economy has a control over every other thing. So the state is also under the control of the one who is actually controlling the economy. So what happens is that the state will actually support this exploitation. This exploitation will become a point where the proletarian class understands that they are being exploited. They develop class consciousness. That means, okay, we are part of this class. We are being exploited. So finally, they will actually seeing who his boss is actually. Boss is none other than someone who is actually trying to maximize his profit alone. His primary focus is he is someone from that class, the property owning class, and I am the propertyless class. I am being exploited by him. So if I want to stop this exploitation, there will be a class struggle between these two. And the class struggle or the class antagonism is the core theme within Marxian thought. And finally, Ramanan Modalali oru chettayanennu manasilakkana. All the working class people would actually identify that his boss has been exploiting him for a long period. And this is the point where the class struggle will rise and which will result in revolution. So history of all hitherto existing society. ഇതുവരെ എക്സിസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്ത എല്ലാ സൊസൈറ്റിയുടെ ഹിസ്റ്ററി എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ഈസ് ദ ഹിസ്റ്ററി ഓഫ് ക്ലാസ് സ്ട്രഗിൾ. ഓക്കെ, history of all existing society has been the history of the class struggle. So you take in, for example, you take the history of the feudal system, or you take the history of master slave or the slavery system. So the two class, master and slave. So there will be that class antagonism there. You take the landowning class and the serfs, or the farmers who are working, or the tillers who are working there. So the two classes. So throughout the history, you will actually identify that there has been class antagonism. Many times a revolution didn't happen because class consciousness might not have attained, or they have not been in large numbers. The exploitation might be in different pockets. But in industrial revolution, all this get addressed because everyone actually comes together. All this exploitation started happening in the developed society, and people become conscious of their class. They become conscious of their exploitation. Understood? Fine. Now, what is the solution? See, just before I continue, okay, fine, nothing. So what is the solution for it? Solution is very simple. Revolution. Solution is very simple. That is revolution. So class struggle will finally lead to revolution. So the class antagonism between the haves and the have-nots, between the bourgeois and the proletariat, the capitalist and the workers, will finally result in revolution. See, this is a point where Marx is very very serious while we is actually discussing with the existing socialist thinkers. The existing socialist thinkers never wanted to bring in a revolution to attain their goals and all. Marx believes that, see, you don't have to keep an eye blind to the idea of revolution because it is bloody revolution, because people get killed. Revolution is an indispensable midwife of social change. Indispensable midwife of social change. Midwife is the one who actually helps the birth of babies. Malayalam Vaitati ennu parayum. In Malayalam we call Vaitati. Even before the institutional delivery and all, and you will see in some movies and all, one old lady would be there who will be assisting the birth. Right? Okay, so that's a midwife. So like we are bringing in a new life to the world, the revolution will actually bring the change that is actually required. So revolution is the indispensable. Indispensable means it is something that that has to be there. It has to be there because you cannot actually say that, okay, we need change, but we don't revolt. If you want change, you need to bring in revolution. So revolution is an indispensable midwife of social change. So the transition from one historical stage to other occurs through revolution. For example, slavery system was brought an end by the feudal revolution. Okay, so then the capitalist revolution or the industrial revolution has brought an end to what? Brought an end to the feudal system and resulted in the capitalist system. And the capitalist system will get end or will get stopped only when the proletariat revolution happen or the working class revolution happen. So revolution has to be there. And the proletarian revolution will be a bloody, swift revolution. It is not a prolonged revolution and all. It's a bloody revolution. That means people will die. So class struggle will actually pave the way for the revolution to occur, because only in class struggle we have actually identified that okay, we are being part of the class, we are being exploited, and that will actually help us to take up arms against the bourgeois class. So right now, Abdul and Rashmi are together in the fight against whom? In the fight against the capital class. That's me and Ammu. Okay, so revolution will actually bring in the changes in the means of production. Okay, and once the means of production is controlled by the working class, the superstructure would be a reflection of what? A reflection of who is actually controlling the means of production. So the working class will actually go and capture the means of production, that is the economy. Because the focus is always in economy. So the working class will actually take up the ownership. So the ultimate objective of this revolution is to capture the means of production. Okay. Once the means of production is being captured by the working class, the other elements of the superstructure would be a reflection of this. Okay. And what would happen is that it is inevitable because we need to bring in change. But once we reach the point, once this proletarian revolution comes in, there would be further no revolution, because the proletarian revolution will actually lead to dictatorship of the proletariat, which will finally lead to communism. In communism, there is no class, there is no private property, there is no profit. Everybody's needs are actually addressed. There is no state, because state has no role to play, because there is no exploitation. So such a scenario, what's the need for a revolution? There's no need for revolution. So the proletarian revolution would be the ultimate revolution. That is the revolution that is actually required to reach our primary objective, or the final objective or the final goal. Okay. So, after the proletarian revolution, there will be no further revolution, because there will be no more contradictions in the society. The dictatorship of the proletariat will slowly evolve into communism. And in communism, since there is no revolution, the concept of revolution itself will come to an end. So all of you are fine with class struggle and revolution? All of you are fine with class struggle and revolution? Okay. Now let's look at the sixth concept. Dictatorship of proletariat. Dictatorship of the proletariat class. So you know that after the revolution, the means of production is actually controlled by the proletarian class. So what happens during this period? See, Marx is against any form of state. Marx is against any form of state control. He believes that the ultimate objective of the system should be where there exists a stateless society. But so why? Because all forms of state are actually exploiting. It is a dictatorship. All forms of state is actually controlling the people. It is one way or another, it is a dictatorship. But here, it is the dictatorship of who? It is the dictatorship of the proletarian class. So what actually happened during this period is that we are reaching a socialist state. The means of production is actually controlled by the proletarian class. So the government formed by the proletarian class will actually use the different elements of the state, that is the police, the military, the judiciary, etc., are different organs of the state. This has been used earlier by the bourgeois class to control the proletarian class. Why? Because the state was in their control and the state was actually supporting them in the exploitation. Now these elements of the state are being controlled by whom? The working class. Marx believed that this is the actual form of democracy because earlier a small group, the bourgeois group, were actually having the power. Right now, the working class, which is the larger majority of the people, is now having power. So this is the actual form of democracy because the power is by the majority. The power is under the hand of majority. Earlier, the power was under the hand of a small minor group or a minority group. So he says that the state is now under the control of majority. So the proletarian class, see, the instrument of oppression used by the capitalist class will actually now be under the control of whom? Under the control of the proletariat class. So they will actually use these elements to convert or change the existing bourgeois into proletarians also. So let's say that Ammu and me, the bourgeois class, has actually remained even after the revolution. Right now, the proletarian state will actually use the power they have right now, use the instruments of police, military, force, etc. and they will actually utilize the system for what? To convert the bourgeois like me and Ammu to proletariat. I will also be forced to work. Okay. So what happened during the dictatorship of the proletariat is that during dictatorship of the proletariat, the bourgeois class will be converted to proletarian class by the proletarian state. Bourgeois class എന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ ഉള്ളവൻ അതായത് ഈ റെവല്യൂഷന് ശേഷം കുറേ ആരൊക്കെ കുറേ ക്യാപിറ്റലിസ്റ്റുകൾ മരിച്ചു വീഴുമായിരിക്കും ആ റെവല്യൂഷനിൽ. പക്ഷെ യഥാർത്ഥത്തിൽ മിച്ചമുള്ള ആ ക്യാപിറ്റലിസ്റ്റുകളെയും കൂടെ നമ്മൾ എന്ത് ചെയ്യുന്നു? വി ആർ ആക്ച്വലി കൺവേർട്ടിംഗ് ദം ഇൻ ടു വർക്കിംഗ് ക്ലാസ്. സോ this is the first time in the history when the power is actually held by the majority. And the dictatorship of the proletariat will actually be the most democratic state. Because the power is really by a majority right now. And why it is called dictatorship? Because all states are dictators according to Marx. All states have been dictatorship, so will be the socialist state be. In a socialist state, the proletarian class will use the different organs of the government, different coercive organs of the government, such as army, police, prison, judicial system, etc., against the existing bourgeois class and try to convert me and Ammu, the elements of the bourgeois class, into proletarian class. Okay, so all these core themes of these are continuing because only after the this is in a continuous order, because only after class struggle revolution will happen, only after revolution the proletarian state will come in existence or the dictatorship of the proletariat will come in, and only after that we will reach the element of communism. And ask like, sir, redistribution of wealth and resources, but actually isn't the majoritarianism said as to be a form of fascism? See, you will see that this dictatorship of proletariat has been misused across the world, and even some elements of fascism has been observed over there. Now we'll come to that point, especially there was actually a meme which was shared yesterday among my friends where Stalin and Marx is looking at each other in photos, and both of them says that, okay, we both like, the Stalin says that I like dictatorship. So Marx is actually asking, you mean the dictatorship of the proletariat. But Stalin doesn't reply and he just smiles. So then again he's asking, so you mean actually the proletarian, the proletarian dictatorship. So you can see that in history when Marxism is being practiced, many people has actually come to this particular point. Many rulers or many leaders has actually come to this particular point. And the dictatorship of the proletariat has actually turned out to be the dictatorship of the party. The dictatorship of the proletariat has turned out to be the dictatorship of the party. So we will discuss those elements later. So another question that has actually asked was like redistribution of wealth and resources. See, in the proletarian class, the means of production is actually controlled by the economy. Controlled by the working class. Okay. And in the system, everybody's need will actually be taken care of. So we are moving to that particular point or the final stage. Let's see that. And Eastern dictatorship of proletariat a contradiction of Marx's idea of stateless society. As there is use of state organs. See, VSN, that is what I'm going to say. This is a dictatorship because what Marx believes is that any form of state is what? Any form of state is actually a dictatorship. But we need this because this is only going to reach that stage of communism. Because we want a stateless society, right? So in order to reach that particular point, we want a brief period of dictatorship of proletariat. Okay. So just wait, let's move to the last stage. So what happens in the last stage? So the last stage is communism. Last stage is communism. So the dictatorship of the proletariat will finally result in communism. Okay, I will tell you how. So all the bourgeois existing in the society is being transferred to proletariat. Is being transferred to proletariat. So right now, me and Ammu, who were actually earlier identified as the bourgeois class, are now part of the proletarian class along with Abdul and along with Rashmi. We all are part of the proletarian class. We all work according to our capacities. And all our needs are actually addressed by the state also. So we have reached a system where there is no profit, there is no class difference in the society. Now, in such a scenario, there is no private ownership also. There is no private ownership also. When the private ownership is actually abolished, the concept of profit is being abolished, we have resulted in a system where no people actually owns anything special. In other words, there is no bourgeois class because bourgeois class were the one who has. Now, like there is no class difference in society. Since there is no class difference in society, there is no class struggle, there is no class antagonism also. Since there is no class difference in society, there is no class oppression also. Earlier, one class that has money has been oppressing the one class that doesn't have money, right? So this has resulted in a system. Right now, the dictatorship of the proletariat has resulted in a system where there is no class difference, right? Because everyone is equal here. Since there is no class difference, there is no class exploitation. Since there is no class exploitation and class oppression, there is no state also. Why? Because the primary objective of the state is to support the higher class in oppressing the lower class. Since there is no higher class and lower class and there is only one class, there is no form of oppression. Since there is no form of oppression, there is no need for a state. And the state will slowly wither away because the ultimate objective of a state was to oppress the propertyless class for the propertied class. Since there is no class difference, there is no state right now. Since there is no need for a state, the state will slowly wither away. So the communism, which is actually the last stage of this social evolution, will actually evolve after the dictatorship of the proletariat. The dialectical process will actually come to an end because communism is our ultimate goal. See, as we were talking about the contradictions in ideas, right? In communist system, there is no class contradiction. Since there is no class contradiction, there is no class struggle. And in a communist society, there is no private property. and there is no private property or private ownership of means of production. Finally, we have resulted in a classless society, a private propertyless society. Then therefore it is what? It is an exploitationless society. Since there is no exploitation, it is also a stateless society because the state will slowly wither away. The means of production will be under the ownership of the community. And there is no profit motive. It is only to address the needs of the society. The state gets redundant in such a system, state gets slowly withered away. So we will finally reach that particular stage where our society is a classless, propertyless society, which is the ultimate objective of our system. So from each according to his capacity to each according to his needs. So a society where everyone's needs are actually addressed. There is no private ownership, there is no profit and all. Everybody will work and everybody's need will actually be taken care. And only those who are actually, everybody will be asked to work and the profits of this work will actually be shared by everyone in the society. And this is what Marx finally aims to reach. Since there is no class contradiction, this is the evolution of the social needs also, the society also. And this is the ultimate truth in the dialectism. So, if you look at Marxian concept, you can see that there has been a proper scientific way in which he is actually trying to analyze or bring in these core themes. And after the dictatorship of the proletariat, it resulted in a scenario where the society has actually transferred into a classless society. But what has actually happened? And this is what is there in Marxian writings, or this is what what is being identified as Marxism through writings. But what is Marxism that we have seen across the world? What has actually happened after the dictatorship of the proletariat? They talk about the class struggle, they talk about the class antagonism. What has actually happened after capturing power by the proletarian class? We have seen that the state hasn't withered away. The state continued to exist. And instead of communism, the dictatorship of proletariat, or I will rephrase it as the dictatorship of the proletarian party, continues in existence. ഒരു വളവ് തിരിഞ്ഞ കമ്മ്യൂണിസം വരുമെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് ആ വളവ് ഇതുവരെ നമ്മൾ തിരിഞ്ഞ് തീർന്നിട്ടില്ല എന്നുള്ളതാണ് സത്യം. It has been observed that we will reach communism very immediately, but for a long period, the proletarian party has been ruling. And the dictatorship of the state has actually resulted not in a classless society, but it has actually divided the society into party or the people along with the party and the others. So a class difference has actually even occurred in those states also. State never withered away, state continued to be in existence, the party continued to be in existence, and the class difference continued to be in existence. You can see that Marxism, as we see across the world, which has been proposed by Lenin or which has been practiced by Stalin, is of bit different from what Marx has actually identified. And what has actually happened is that it was much, even when we see that it can be practiced, that dictatorship of the proletariat has never finally or never has resulted into that communist system also. Okay. See, in the next class, while we are going to study about the next ideology, we'll just take up what has happened during the period of Lenin and Stalin and all, in order to see how Marxism is being practiced across the world. Okay, then we can bring those as a part of our analysis. Then we can actually move to the next ideology. Okay. So, see, somebody is asking like while we are looking at the communism, see, communism is very difficult to attain, right? So in that perspective, somebody has even criticized that Marx is also very utopian in believing that we could reach this particular point. In hindsight, somebody has actually argued like that. Okay. Then That is why the USSR model has failed. Okay. Can we use it in conclude? We can bring in as in conclusion also, but we will be seeing what is being practiced by Mao, what is being practiced by Lenin, what is being practiced by Stalin also. Okay. See, and we will talk about whether it will kill innovation, etc. See, I just want to understand, like, has everyone understood this 7 concept? Has everyone understood what Marx has actually identified? We'll have an analysis whether it will kill innovation, whether that a profit motive will be replaced by addressing the social need, etc. And also we'll see that what is the role of the party, then what is the role of or how the revolution will come in, what is the role of farmers, and whether they are the one or it is only the industrial workers who will be part of it, etc. Okay, all this which is something that we will be discussing in the next class as a brief conclusion to what we have studied today. So have you understood this 7 concept, all of you? Everyone? So this is what actually Marx has actually intended to bring into the system. But the system that is being brought in by many Marxian thinkers or Marxian leaders is a bit different from what Marx has brought in. So we will have an analysis of that in the next class. So I hope everybody has actually understood this. You might have certain doubts and all, I agree. But have you understood this, that evolution? So I believe that I have actually taken you to each of these words and finally resulted in that communism. So with this, I think we will conclude today's session. In tomorrow's and after tomorrow's session, we will look up what we will take care of the rest of the ideology in very brief. Okay. So shall we conclude today's session? I hope everybody has understood this. Okay. So now I would like to meet all of you in tomorrow's and after tomorrow's session also. So we will actually discuss some of the other ideologies also and try to wind up or take up the package of ideology within these 5 sessions. Then after that, our classes would be starting on July 5th, where we will start from the political thinkers, starting from Socrates and Plato, and we will move ahead from there. So all of you find interesting in political science could join our session over there also. Okay. So thank you. Happy learning.